This is the state of the world on June 11th, 2022. This is the first time I'm doing something like this. Um, Basically, it's just a way for me to organize my thoughts, get my thoughts into the world. I don't know if anyone actually cares enough to watch me say my bullshit, but if you're out there, then thank you, I guess. Basically, this is a video log of my thoughts during that day, what I think about the world. Just a way for me to organize what I'm thinking in my head and to serve as a log for the future in case, I'm wondering what was I thinking on that day. I can come back and see what I was thinking about on that day. Um, so a couple things. What am I reading? I'm currently about one third of the way through The Idiot by Dostoevsky. I've been trying to read it for a really long time, and I've been making very, very slow progress. And I'm gonna try my best to finish that soon while I have some time during the summer. I'm also listening to an audio version of Industrial Society and Its Future by Ted Kaczynski. I I think that's very interesting. I'm still at the beginning, but I think I will write a review on that. Basically, I think that during the pandemic, people have gotten a lot more angry, a lot more upset. Um, right? Like when I'm at university and I go to my McDonald's late at night, there's about a one-third chance I'll see I'll see a homeless dude there or a drug addict, and they're shouting at the manager and causing issues with the customers. And yeah, I've seen people get kicked out by the police for stealing, for swearing at people. It's pretty ugly, and I don't really. I think it's a lot worse than it was a couple of years ago. Uh, so I just finished my third year at university. And my first year at university, this was 2019 before the whole pandemic and the shutdown. And since then, I'm seeing a lot more tents. I'm seeing a lot more homeless people. Um, it's just a pretty ugly situation. And this is something Ray Dalio talks about, I think, which is that, if there's kind of no baseline to society, if people are working jobs and they don't feel like they're progressing in life and they're actually falling behind, right? Um, right, with this inflation at almost 10%, right? If let's say you saved up $100,000 or $200,000, you lost basically ten to $20,000. That's really tough for a lot of people, especially when they're barely hanging on. They're living paycheck to paycheck. I think I think chicken is up like 18% this year. Same thing with gas. Gas prices are through the roof. So you have a bunch of these people in society, and they're kind of falling behind. I mean, they have nothing to lose, and that's a very dangerous position for society to be in, where you have a lot of people who are very angry, possibly lost their job during the pandemic, and their savings are being eaten away by inflation. It's not good. And I think as a society, we need to come together and say, if you're if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to get a job and put in the hours, you should at least be able to afford a minimum quality of life, right? That we need to have some sort of social contract between the individual and society that enables people to do that. Um, and I think that was there, and in the past couple of years, that that's been slowly eroding away. And um, you know, there's some people who argue against this idea by saying, look, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we're a lot wealthier than we were back then. We have a lot more technology. We're able to consume goods more easily. You can order something on Amazon and get it within a day or two. But I think that's the wrong way to frame things and to look at things, because that's not how we look at things as a society. We don't look at how medieval kings lived 500 years ago and say, wow, we live better lives than them. Even though that is probably materially speaking true, we compare our own lives to how they were 5, 10 years ago. That's the main point of comparison. And then we also compare to other people in society. So if there's a huge wealth gap, right, and we have a bunch of people who can't afford rent, they look around them and they see people making billions of dollars, billionaires increasing their wealth by, a ton, then they get angry and they compare themselves to their neighbors, and they feel like they're falling behind, and they feel like their quality of life is decreasing from what they had 5 or 10 years ago. That's really not good. And I have nothing against billionaires. Or people who are wealthy. I don't have anything against the 1%. I think they should do whatever is in their own best interest to accumulate as much wealth as possible. Um, but I think the government has really messed up with a lot of these levers that they have in order to control this thing, right? For example, there's a theory going around that CPI and inflation is being manipulated, right? The Fed has artificially suppressed the rate for for many years. They even when the economy was good for since 2008, there was a huge boom in the economy and the stock market. Um, they didn't really use that opportunity to save up money and to make sure the hard times would not be so hard. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of the consequences of government overspending money uh, with the pandemic, and in the States, for example, with the infrastructure bill. The government's spending a lot of money, going into huge amounts of debt, and possibly as well, that's another problem in terms of national security, because we have all these um, other countries holding our debt. Um, well, people can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but generally, I think that's not so good. We want our balance sheet to be healthy. We don't want a lot of debt, and being over leveraged on stuff, like the real estate market, is what causes recessions, like what we saw in 2008. Um, so that's no good. To me, it's very clear that the government has to step up and play their role in trying to fix the situation. And the way they fix the situation is not through handing people money, it's not through printing more money, it's through making the difficult decisions of increasing the rate. And for example, one effect of that would be that it makes mortgages harder to afford in the short term, but it will bring the housing prices down, because right now you can afford huge mortgages with relatively small incomes. So that's led to huge inflation in the real estate market, and that's not good because it's pricing out all the young people. And the government doesn't have an incentive to make housing less affordable, because all the people love seeing their housing price, their home values go up. It's their nest egg, and I think unfortunately that's a very difficult decision that the government has to make in order to improve the lives of the new generation who didn't do anything wrong. They deserve to be able to work hard and own a house. They deserve to live a good life, and unfortunately, the government is screwing them over, right? I think the unfortunate reality of the situation we're currently in as a society is that we don't want to admit that we need to go through some pain before things get better. You know, a recession may suck, increasing the rate may suck, but really there are a lot of businesses and people now making a lot of money that really should not be making so much money. And the recession basically is a huge filter for determining who really has strong fundamentals, who actually has a good business. Because in the past 10 or so years since 2008, we've seen huge increases in stock value. Everybody feels like a genius when they're making money, but the real determinant of a good business is if they can survive a downturn, if they can survive a recession. And the recession will really show everybody who has actual solid fundamentals. We've already kind of started to see a little bit of that unravel. Um, Stocks are generally down quite a bit, especially in the tech sector. And I think this has shown that the the tech sector has been really overinflated because of government incentives like cheap capital. And a bunch of people made a lot of money, for example, venture capital firms, and they didn't really know where to put it. So they just pumped up valuations companies to sky high, and there is no accountability. I think that we will go through a recession, people will lose their jobs. It'll be tough for a while, but it is better than the alternative, which is to keep inflating this bubble, and when the bubble finally bursts, it'll be very, very, very bad. Much worse than if we had responsible leaders now who put their foot down and said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to go through tough times, and this is what we need to do. We need to come together as a society and fix all these underlying problems that have been around for decades because no one is willing to take responsibility for those problems.